All right, we're back with Proclus's commentary on the Timaeus, and we're just going to pick up right where we left off, pretty much. Okay, so next quote. For the waters which are beheld within the mouth we have just now mentioned have the form of a port with a narrow entrance, but the mouth itself is a true sea, and the land which surrounds it may be in every respect truly denominated the continent. Right, we had an analogy that was mentioned last time between inside the Mediterranean being the same, the formal, etc., all those kind of higher categories, and then outside, the waters were associated with matter. I forget specifically what Atlantis and then the surrounding continent referred to, but the continent was described as boundless, so that's like more in the column of the indefinite. The overall metaphor, remember, that Proclus is going with is the Athenians represent the celestial sphere slash intelligible, and then Atlanteans represent sublunar, world of generation, slash the sensible. So, all right. Let's see what he does with this bit. The waters within the mouth indicate the genre of the better coordination, right? As being converted to themselves and rejoicing in a stable and uniting power. For the mouth symbolically manifests the cause which defines and separates the two portions of mundane natures. But the port with a narrow entrance signifies the convolved, self-converging, arranged, and immaterial hyparxis of these mundane portions. For through the narrow entrance, it is signified that interval and extension proceed from the worse coordination, but through the port and hyparxis is indicated exempt from the confused and disorderly motion of material natures. For such are ports affording a protection from the tumults in the sea. If, however, someone should say that an elevation to the more intellectual and divine natures in the universe becomes a port to souls, he will not be far from the truth. Okay, some relatively plausible sounding interpretations in light of his overall way of interpreting this. Okay. Next quote. In this Atlantic island, there was a combination of kings who, with great and admirable power, subdued the whole island, together with many other islands and parts of the continent, and besides this, subjected to their dominion all Libya as far as to Egypt, and Europe as far as the Tyrrhenian Sea, or Tyrrhene Sea, which is like Italy. Let's see specifically where that is. Tyrrhene Sea. Okay, so that's the sea on the western coast of Italy. Okay. Proclus. In what is here said, it is requisite to recollect the Platonic hypotheses about the earth, that Plato does not measure the magnitude of it conformably to mathematicians, but apprehends the interval of it to be greater than they admit it to be, as in, the Phaedo, as Socrates says in the Phaedo, and that he supposes that there are many habitable parts similar to the part which we inhabit. So Proclus, interestingly, seems to be interpreting Plato literally with that myth from the Phaedo. Also, it's the same notion from the Gorgias, right? Like the great earth with many depressions. Hence, he relates that there is an island in a continent of so great a magnitude in the external sea. For in short, if the earth is naturally spherical, it is necessary that it should be so according to the greater part of it. That portion of it, however, which is inhabited by us, exhibits great inequality by its cavities and prominencies. Hence, there is elsewhere an expanded plane of the earth and an interval extended on high. Yeah, so he's like taking those myths totally literally. Interesting. Okay. For according to Heraclitus, he who passes through a region very difficult to access will arrive at the Atlantic mountain, the magnitude of which is said to be so great by the Ethiopic historians that it reaches to the ether and sends forth a shadow as far as to 5,000 stadia. For the sun is concealed by it from the 9th hour of the day till it entirely sets. Nor is this at all wonderful, for Athos, a Macedonian mountain, emits a shadow as far as to Lemnos, which is distant from it 700 stadia. And Marcellus, who wrote the Ethiopic history, not only relates that the Atlantic mountain was of such a great height, but Ptolemy also says that the lunar mountains are immensely high, and Aristotle informs us that Caucasus is illuminated by the solar rays during the third part of the night after the setting, and also for the third part before the rising of the sun. And he who looks to the whole magnitude of the earth, bounded by its elevated parts, will infer that it is truly immense, according to the assertion of Plato. So that we are not now in want of certain mathematical methods to the development of what is said about the earth, nor do we attempt to recur to them. For these methods measure the earth according to the surface which is inhabited by us. But Plato says that we dwell in a cavity, and that the whole earth is elevated, which also the sacred rumor of the Egyptians asserts. And thus much concerning what is related of the magnitude of the Atlantic island, in order to show that it is not proper to disbelieve what is said by Plato, though it should be received as a mere history. So even if we do just interpret it as history, we should still believe it. But it's interesting because, like, geographically, given what we actually know about the Earth, Plato's description is totally on point, whereas Proclus trying to interpret it through this kind of myth from the Gorgias/Phaedo conception obviously doesn't make as much sense. But with respect to the power of this island, that there were 10 kings in it who begat 5 male twins, and that it ruled over the other islands, certain parts of the continent, and some parts within the Pillars of Hercules, all these particulars are clearly related in the Critias. Now, however, for it is proposed to make an analysis of the particulars, the power is said to be great and admirable, according to a reference to the universe, because it proceeds to everything, and comprehends totally the whole of the second coordination. Okay. Comprehends totally the second coordination, which is, I think when he says second coordination, that just means, like, yeah, and he's going to explain that the next couple sentences, but it's just the column of the indefinite dyad generally. So that power of Atlantis comprehends everything in that second coordination, the column of the even/indefinite dyad. All right. For it is held together by 10 kings, because the decad comprehends the rulers of the 2 coordinations, since the Pythagoreans also say that all opposites are comprehended in the decad. But they were twins, so that there are 5 dyads, twins being 5 times begotten from Poseidon and Clites. What is the Greek version of that name? Poseidon and Clites. Is it? I'm not sure. Let me just look up Clites, goddess. Okay, Cletus. No, that's not it. And then Clyte. Yeah. none is mentioned that would fit here. I don't like this using all the Roman names for gods and things that Taylor uses. Alright, anyway, twins being 5 times begotten from Poseidon and his wife, I assume. I could just search, like, Poseidon's wife. No, it was a mortal. It was a mortal woman. Atlantis story wife. Let's put that. Poseidon chose Amphitrite from among her sisters as the Nereids perform a dance on the island of Naxos. Okay. Yeah, I'm not totally sure, but I remember it was a mortal woman. Okay. Poseidon and Clitses, because according to the measures of justice, there is likewise an orderly distribution of this coordination, of which the pentad is an image. I think the number 5 is associated with justice in the theology of arithmetic. Okay. The progression of it, however, is through the dyad, just as that of the better coordination is through the monad. So 5 twins. Okay, that's actually really strong evidence of Proclus's interpretation there. To my mind, anyway. Did we solve that? Yeah. Immortal. So here's the segment from the dialogue, I think. A quote. A mortal woman named Cleito once lived on an isolated island. Poseidon fell in love with a human mortal and created a dwelling, sanctuary at the top of the hill near the middle of the island. Made those rings. She gave birth to 5 sets of twin boys. Yeah, so it was a mortal woman named Cleito. Or here it's Clites. Or Clytes. Okay. Alright, so proceeds through dyads, because that's the nature of that lesser coordination. Moreover, all of them are the descendants of Poseidon, because all the connection of contraries and the mundane war belong to the middle fabrication. Okay, mundane war, world of generation. Again, the working notion I have of the 3 fabrications. The first fabrication is celestial, middle is sublunar, and then third is what joins them. We haven't heard much of that third fabrication yet. For as this god presides over the contrariety which everywhere exists, he likewise rules over generation and corruption, and all various motion. But these kings subdued the Atlantic island as comprehending all the first and most total genre of the worst coordination. Okay. Right? And they subdued the other islands as likewise comprehending middles through the wholeness of them, but they also vanquished parts of the continent as adorning as much as possible of the last of things. And they had dominion over certain parts of the internal habitable region, because the last parts of the better are subservient to the first parts of the worse coordination. Interesting. So it's into the Pillars of Hercules because the last parts of the better are inferior to the first parts of the worse. So, okay. Nor is this at all wonderful, since certain daimons are in subjection to certain heroes, and partial souls, which belong to the intelligible portion of things, are frequently slaves to fate. Okay. So, yeah, partial members of higher orders can be inferior to, like, higher members of inferior orders. I think I said that right. But, yeah. That's good that Proclus states this explicitly. The last part of the better are often subservient to the first parts of worse coordinations. And that also, he extends that to ranks in general. So some, presumably, like taking it to an extreme, some souls would kind of rule over some partial intellects. But such also is the Titanic order with the gods to which Atlas belongs. Okay. So such in the sense that these gods rule over members of superior orders that are lesser than them, I think. Such also is the Titanic order with the gods to which Atlas belongs. And the first of these 10 kings was called Atlas, and it is said in the Atlanticus gave the name to the island. The summits, therefore, of the second coordination are adorned indeed by the Olympian gods, of whom Athena is the leader, but they subdue the whole of the essence which is subordinate to the gods, but terminates in the worst coordination, such as the essence of irrational souls, of material masses, and of matter itself. Okay, let's parse this sentence a little bit. The summits of the second coordination, so that's calling them the dyad, are adorned indeed by the Olympian gods, of whom Athena is the leader. So Athena, I suppose, he said before that certain aspects, certain orders of the gods are associated with the monad, others with the dyad, and I think it was like preserving and guardian were, and paternal were monadic, and then connective, and some of a couple of the others were dyadic, but elsewhere I've seen it said that the female gods generally are associated with the dyad. So it's not just the order that the god belongs to, but is it male or female? So here it seems like he's saying that some of the Olympian gods adorn the summits of the second coordination, although it's inferior, still the gods preside over it, and Athena chief among them, which would imply that, you know, she's chief because she is dyadic in some sense, being female, but they subdue the whole of the essence which is subordinate to the gods. They being the Olympian gods, they subdue the whole essence which is subordinate to the gods, but terminates in the worst coordination, such as the essence of irrational souls and material masses and of matter itself. So I guess they're saying, like, yeah, the Olympian gods preside over the summit of the inferior coordination and rule over the whole essence directly inferior to their rank, but going all the way down to irrational souls, material masses, and matter itself, the Olympian gods are no longer directly in charge of those things, I suppose. Okay. Plato also appears to have called the power of the Atlantics great and admirable because Thaumas and Bias are said by ancient theologists to have belonged to this order. Okay. Wait, interesting. Bias is one of the 7 sages, and he was just a person. So he was said to be like an Atlantean, or what? Who is Thaumas also? Let's see. In Greek mythology, Thaumas was a sea god, son of Pontus and Gaia, and the full brother of Nereus, Porcus, Ceto, and Eurybia. Okay. So, why does he call the power great and admirable? Because Thaumas and Bias are said to have belonged to that order. Not sure. Perhaps, too, he so denominated it because the whole of the second coordination is the progeny of infinity, which we say is the first power, dunamis, just as the better coordination is the offspring of bound. On this account, he celebrates the power of the Atlantics, just as he does the virtue of the Athenians, which belongs to bound, for it is the measure of those that possess it. Okay, he calls virtue the measure of some of those that possess virtue. You can see, like, in one sense how that would be true, the measure of a man in some sense. And then, like, more specifically, like, particular virtues would be the proper limits and bounds and structure of the different kind of faculties. After this manner, therefore, I think we may be able to make the analysis according to the Pythagorean principles. The words of Plato, likewise, have a great augment in order to exhibit the work of the victors in a greater and more splendid point of view. For he says, dunamin te, through the union of the particle te, augmenting dunamin, that is power. And he also adds great and admirable, but each of these is different from the other, for power may be great, though it is nothing else, but it is said to be admirable from other things. And by how much the more admirable that is which is vanquished, by so much greater is the victor demonstrated to be. So by saying that the power was admirable, he's elevating the Athenians who defeated Atlantis, of course. Besides this, also indicating through divisions the multitude subdued by this power, he evinces that it is multitudinous and transcendent. Okay. These interpretations are all pretty neat. The metaphors are remaining pretty consistent, and you can see the Pythagorean stuff. I believe, Plato actually encoded some of this stuff, like with the dyad, pairs of dyads, the pentad, and the language about power. That all sounds legit. So I can buy what Proclus is saying now. Next quote. But then all this power, being collected into one, endeavored to enslave our region and yours, and likewise every place situated within the mouth of the Atlantic Sea. Okay. Proclus. Plato does not say that there was once sedition among divine natures, or that subordinate subdued more excellent beings. But let these things indeed be true in human affairs. The present narration, however, indicates that the most total of the genre and the second coordination of things in the universe proceed through all things. So the summit of the series of the indefinite dyad extends to the last of things. For there are both in the heavens and everywhere a separating and uniting power, and nothing is destitute of these. Right. Interesting. Does that extend to pure, matter itself? I suppose it would, right? It'd be weird if matter was not governed by the indefinite dyad in any sense. In more excellent natures, however, these powers do not subsist with division, nor multitudinously, but collected into one, and with one impulse, but this is unitedly, and according to one and a continued life. For as in the worst coordination, the one is multiplied, thus also in the better, multitude is united. Hence multitude is everywhere, and is vanquished through union. Of these things the Atlantics wishing to subdue every place within the mouth of the Atlantic Sea, all their powers being collected into one, but at the same time being vanquished by the Athenians, are an image. For multitude and separation, though they may be surveyed in the better coordination, yet they will be seen to subsist there unitedly, multitude not being there victorious, but sameness, and in short, the better genre. Next quote. Then it was, O Solon, that the power of your city was conspicuous to all men for its virtue and strength. All right. Plato opposes to the power of the Atlantics the power of the Athenians, preferring this appellation as being adapted to the middle fabrication. Power, I guess, the power of your city. So we're talking about this war is a model of the cosmic war, but more adapted to the middle fabrication, world of generation. Fine. The war between opposites was said to constitute the Veil of Athena, though, which I think was beyond just the middle fabrication. I think that's like at a cosmic scale, acting as that kind of ground of the law of the universe, even including the first fabrication. I don't think that that's restricted, because the model... I definitely remember it being said that the model for the ideal state is the cosmos, and at the same time the cosmic war. And that's not restricted just to the sublunar realm, that includes the celestial sphere. But here, this war in particular maybe emphasizes the middle fabrication. We'll just go with that for now. But he uses power to indicate, as opposed to some word that would imply something more monadic and intelligible, power, because we're talking about a conflict at the level of the world of generation. And he celebrates the more excellent power for its virtue and strength, in order that through virtue he may indicate its alliance to the philosophic nature of Athena, for another theology, and not the Orphic only, calls her virtue, the Chaldean theology. So in both the Orphic and Chaldean systems, Athena is termed virtue. It's an epithet of Athena. But through strength, its alliance to her philopolemic nature. Virtue and strength, so two aspects of Athena. But he calls the power conspicuous because it is mundane and contributes to the fabrication of sensibles. Okay? As opposed to intelligibles, which would be more occult. But sensibles are conspicuous. I guess because we are talking about that level of the second fabrication, the middle fabrication. And to the Atlantics, indeed, he alone attributes power, and this continually, because they are arranged under infinity. So the description of the Athenians, you get virtue and strength. With the Atlanteans, it's just power. But he says that the Athenians vanquished this power through virtue, for as they belong to the coordination of bound, they are characterized by virtue, which measures the passions and uses powers in a becoming manner. Okay. Next quote. For as its armies surpassed all others, both in magnanimity and military arts, so with respect to its contests, whether it was assisted by the rest of the Greeks, over whom it sometimes presided in warlike affairs, or whether it was deserted by them through the incursions of the enemies, and thus was in extreme danger, yet still it remained triumphant. In the meantime, those who were not yet enslaved it liberated from danger, and procured the most ample liberty for all those of us who dwell within the pillars of Hercules. Proclus. As we have triply divided the inferior coordination into first, middle, and last boundaries, thus also we must divide the superior into the most total. I'm going to sneeze. Okay, I hit the mute this time. So that's good. Alright, so the inferior coordination has its first, middle, and last. Thus also, right, so we had like the islands, the surrounding continent, the waters, I think. Thus also we must divide the superior into the most total and the most partial genre, and those that subsist between these. So we're dividing up the superior coordination, column of the odd, into three. And having made this division, we shall arrange the Athenians as analogous to the first genre, but the other Greeks who were not yet enslaved to the middle, and those who were now slaves to the last genre. Makes sense. And then the fact that they were slaves shows that the superior members of the inferior coordination can rule over the inferior members of the superior coordination. For according to this arrangement, those that belong to the Athenian series, or I should say Athenaic series, those that belong to that series vanquish those that belong to the series of Poseidon, those that rank as first subduing those that rank as second, the monadic, the dyadic, and in short, the better vanquishing the worse. But the middle genre eternally preserve their own order, and are not vanquished by the worse coordination on account of the union of themselves and the stable genus of power. They likewise liberate from slavery those that are enslaved, recalling them to union and permanency. For some things, indeed, are always in matter, others are always separated from it, and others sometimes become situated under the material genre, and sometimes have an arrangement in a separate life. Just as in the drama pertaining to us, at one time we are arranged under the Titanic, and at another under the Olympian order, and at one time our course terminates in generation, but at another in the heavens. So is he talking about us as souls? So makes sense that, of course, sometimes we would go beyond the world of generations. Sometimes we go into the heavens. That's fully attested in a bunch of different sources, including Plato himself. But then sometimes being arranged under the Titanic and sometimes under the Olympian order. That I don't remember from the dialogues, but it's an interesting idea that souls sometimes fall under the Titanic, sometimes the Olympian order. So, okay. This, however, happens to partial souls through the invariably permanent providence of the gods, which leads back souls to their pristine felicity. For as in consequence of their being genesiurgic gods, souls descend in subserviency to their will. So, because some of the gods... because there are gods of the world of generation, souls descend into the world of generation by that divine will. Thus also, through the prior subsistence of anagogic causes, the ascent of our souls from the realms of generation is effected. So, elevating causes, including probably the elevating gods, presubsist and help our souls ascend out of the realm of generation. Okay. And thus much concerning the whole meaning of the words before us. Let us, however, concisely discuss each particular. The words, therefore, surpassed all others, manifest the total comprehension of the first genre of the more divine part. But the words in magnanimity and military arts have the same meaning as athenaically. For through magnanimity they imitate the philosophic characteristic of the goddess, but through warlike arts her philopolemic characteristic. Okay, sure. And the words, whether it was assisted in, magnanimity was one of those qualities from the Republic, listed as like the necessary attributes of the good philosopher. Including, what else was there? The good philosopher has a good memory, magnanimity, I assume like the other cardinal virtues. Do you guys remember attributes of the philosopher from the Republic? Yeah. Shame. I'm gonna see if that comes up quickly. Okay. The philosopher's natural abilities and virtues prove that they have what is necessary to rule well. They love what is what is rather than what becomes. They hate falsehood. They are moderate. They are courageous. They are quick learners. They have a good memory. They like the segment breaks off here. But yeah, so they love beings rather than what becomes. They hate falsehood. They are temperate, courageous, quick learners, good memory, magnanimous, and they like proportion, since the truth is like it. They have a pleasant nature also. Okay. Some stuff about the good philosopher, but here magnanimity covers that philosophic aspect of Athena. Okay. And the words, whether it was assisted by the rest of the Greeks, over whom it sometimes presided in warlike affairs, or whether it was deserted by them through the incursions of the enemies, all that signifies that first and total causes produce some things in conjunction with second and middle causes, but others by themselves, beyond the production of these, and being alone in their energy. Right, so sometimes the Athenians work with the other Greeks, secondary causes, sometimes they operate alone. For the genus of the gods, and that which is posterior to the gods, do not produce equally, but the effective power of the gods proceeds to a greater extent, since everywhere more divine causes energize prior to, together with, and posterior to their effects. Okay. credibility, therefore, of this may be multifariously produced, but the extreme danger manifests the last production of the first genre. So the idea that gods energize prior to, together with, and posterior to their effects can be proved, and I guess Proclus doesn't want to go through a formal proof of that now. He does it in the Elements of Theology. But he just says that can be well demonstrated. But the extreme danger manifests the last production of the first genre. And the trophies signify that the second coordination is perfected under the first, being adorned by it, that it is in a certain respect converted by the power of it, and that there are in the last of things invariably permanent indications of the conversion of less excellent natures proceeding from the first of things. For whatever is arranged in the worst coordination and invested with form, material causes receding, affords a sufficient indication of the inspective care of the better order, which is especially the peculiarity of trophies. But the most ample liberty is an indication of the divine and liberated order, proceeding from on high to all things, which liberty the Athenians imparted to the Greeks by vanquishing the Atlantics, or rather the Olympic, by subduing the Titanic genre. For thus the demiurgic will is accomplished, and the worse is vanquished by the better coordination, in partial natures indeed the Atlantics by the Athenians, but in wholes the Titans by the Olympian gods. So, alright, he says the Atlantics and Athenians, we're talking about partial natures. I wonder how literally he means natures there. Does that imply that like human mortal things are partial souls? Or is it just in the sense that they are participants in nature, they are parts of nature, so they're partial as natures rather than partial as souls? That I'm not sure about. I'm not sure if mortal souls are inherently partial. But I guess, in each series, you move from the less partial, more whole, to the more partial. So maybe it's on a spectrum, and mortal souls are somewhat partial, though not as partial as like the shades of souls that are sometimes discussed, or the materially invested daimons. Those are very partial daimonical natures. There are even very partial henatic natures that are not gods, but are kind of in the series of the gods, but they don't rise to the level of gods. So, maybe we don't have to treat it as a firm binary, but here there is a firm binary between the divine beings, exemplifying this cosmic war, which are totally whole, and then mortals, which are at least more partial than the gods. That's fair to say. All right. Though they are robust and oppose the better order through pernicious pride and insolent improbity, says the theologist, whom Plato, emulating, asserts that the Atlantics insolently proceeded against the Athenians. Okay. Not sure who the theologist is there. Maybe it's from the author of the Chaldean Oracles, the writings of Julian, the two Julians, father and son duo that produced those. Not sure who the theologist is there. But all right. Next quote. But in succeeding times, prodigious earthquakes and deluges taking place and bringing with them desolation, in the space of one dreadful day and night, all the warlike race of Athenians was at once merged under the earth. And the Atlantic island itself, being absorbed in the sea, entirely disappeared. And hence that sea is at present innavigable from the impeding mud which the subsiding island produced. Proclus. That what is here said has a physical deduction is evident to those who are not entirely ignorant of the physical theory. For it is not wonderful that there should have been an earthquake so great as to have destroyed such a large island, since an earthquake that happened a little before our time shook both Egypt and Bithynia, and it is not at all paradoxical that a deluge should follow an earthquake. For this usually happens in great earthquakes, as Aristotle relates, who at the same time adds the cause. For where a deluge takes place together with earthquakes, the waves are the cause of this passion. For when the spirit which produces the earthquake does not yet flow towards the earth, and is not able to drive backward the sea which is impelled by a certain contrary spirit, urging it in a contrary direction through the wind which propels it, but nevertheless stops the sea by hindering its progression, it is the cause of much sea which is impelled by the spirit contrary to this, becoming collected together. Then, however, the sea thus collected, flowing most abundantly, the spirit impelling it in a contrary direction, enters under the earth and produces an earthquake. Okay. But the sea deluges the place. For after this manner also about Achaia there was an earthquake, accompanied with an ingress of the waves of the sea, which deluged the maritime cities, Boris and Hellas, so that neither will any physiologist reject this narration who considers the affair rightly. Moreover, that the same place may become pervious and impervious, continent and sea, is among the things admitted by physiologists, according to Aristotle, and which history demonstrates. Aristotle also relates in his Meteors that there was mud in the external sea after the mouth of it, and that the place there was marshy, so that if to pelokarta bracheos signifies marshy, it is not wonderful. For even now rocks concealed under the sea and having water on their surface are called breakers. Why, therefore, should anyone contending for the truth of these things be disturbed? That these particulars, however, have reference to the admirable and orderly distribution of the universe, we shall be convinced by recollecting what is said by Orpheus about the hurling into Tartarus near the end of the fabrication of things. For he, delivering the demiurgic opposition between the Olympian and Titanic gods, terminates the whole orderly distribution in the extremities of the universe, and imparts to these also the undefiled providence of the gods. Plato, therefore, knowing this, and delivering to us wholes in images, extends and leads into the invisible these twofold genera, and through this, disappearing, imitates the Orphic precipitation into Tartarus. Okay. So... okay, yeah. The destruction of the island and the subduing or submergence of the Athenian warriors is showing that the twofold genre, the two coordinations of things, monadic and dyadic, extend all the way to the last of things, like Tartarus. Orpheus, I guess, describes that as among the last of the acts of the mundane fabrication, hurling into Tartarus. Okay. For in order that the last of things may be adorned and participate of divine providence, it is requisite that both the superior and inferior coordination should extend their productions from on high as far as to the mundane extremity. Each, however, effects this in a manner adapted to itself, the one being shaken and entering under the earth, which is the same as proceeding stably and solidly, but the other disappearing, which is the same as becoming material, disorderly, and formless. Under the earth being a symbol of the firm and stable, but in the sea of that which is very mutable, disorderly, and flowing. That seems pretty plausible. For in the last of things, permanency and generation are from the better, but corruption, mutation, and disorderly motion are from the worse coordination. Since, however, these things are adorned, both the invisible and visible fabrication receiving their completion, on this account, Plato says, they happened in one dreadful day and night. Night indicating the invisible causes, but day the visible, and the dreadfulness signifying opposing power, the inflexible, and that which proceeds through all things. But because all these are accomplished according to demiurgic powers, earthquakes and deluges took place which are adapted to the middle fabrication. For if he wished to signify Zeusian powers or energies, he would have said thunders and lightnings happened. Oh, right, the 3 fabrications. So we have the two. There's the Zeus of like holes, the demiurge of holes, who is just the demiurge simply, and he's intelligible, and he's an intellectual god. But then the 3 demiurges is the lower Zeus, Poseidon, Hades. So lower Zeus will be the intellectual demiurge responsible for the creation of the heavens. And then Poseidon will be, I don't know if he's the vivific demiurge or he has a title like that corresponding to the intellectual demiurge there. But he's responsible for the 2nd fabrication, the world of generation. Okay. And then Hades being the 3rd fabrication. I don't know. I guess that's the revertive. Like, is that joining mundane to celestial fabrication? In the course of the Timaeus, there's, the description of the creation of the world, the various regions of the world, and then later I think they describe the creation of man. So maybe that's the 3rd fabrication, like the creation of man, who is kind of what joins the intelligible and sensible together. I'm not sure, but maybe that's the first intimation I've had of that. Hades being associated with a reversion of souls, as we saw in the commentary on the Phaedo by Damascus. Okay, for if he wished to signify Jovian powers or energies, he would have said thunders and lightnings happened. But since he delivers Poseidonian demiurgic energies, he assimilates them to earthquakes or deluges. For it is usual to call this god Earthshaker, and the source of marine water, Kuenoketen. And because time signifies a progression in order and a well-arranged diminution, he says that all these events took place in succeeding time. It is not therefore proper to say that he who destroys an argument takes away also the subjects, as Homer says of the Phaeacians, and of the wall which the Greeks raised, since the things which are now asserted are not fictitious, but true. For many parts of the earth are deluged by the sea, and what he says happened is not at all impossible. Nor again does he relate it as a mere history, but he introduces it for the purpose of indicating the providence which proceeds through all things and extends even to the last of things. In short, it is necessary to assert, since the whole orderly distribution of things receives its completion from the visible and invisible fabrication, that for the purpose of giving perfection to the demiurgic productions of the second Father, the gifts both of the better and worse coordination proceed as far as to the last of beings, the former vanquishing the subjects of its power through the warlike genus, and illuminating a stable power through the entering under the earth, i.e. through proceeding firmly and solidly, but the latter producing ultimate division and connecting the most material and indefinite motion of Tartarus. But these things being adorned, it reasonably follows that what remains is an impervious and uninvestigable place of the sea. For there is no other passage and progression of the adorning genre of the universe, but this is that which is truly mud, and which is mentioned by Socrates in the Phaedo, when he is teaching us concerning the subterranean places. Okay. No other passage and progression of the adorning genre. So once they sink, it's signifying the progression to the last of things, and there's one way down. So then when they sink, of course, they'll be impassable mud, and mud is associated with those infernal regions. Apparently, okay. For the place under the earth obscurely retains the forms of corporeity, which it possesses through the inferior coordination, subsiding and proceeding to the end of the orderly distribution of things, for the Titanic order, being driven by Zeus as far as to Tartarus, fills what is there contained with deiform guards. Okay, like guards in the shape of the gods. The Titanic order going down to Tartarus leaves these guards, so I guess that also just feeds into the impervious and uninvestigable place because it's guarded. That's a little bit obscure, and I'm not going to spend too much time on it. How long is the next section? Not super long, so we will hit that too. Next quote. And this, O Socrates, is the sum of what the elder Critias repeated from the narration of Solon. But when yesterday you were speaking about a polity and its citizens, I was surprised on recollecting the present history, for I perceived how divinely, from a certain fortune, and not wandering from the mark, you collected many things agreeing with the narration of Solon. All right, so we've had this kind of abbreviated account of the Atlantic War. There's obviously more in the Critias. We've seen that Proclus does try to defend its historical accuracy. That the War of the Atlantics and Athenians contributes to the theory of the fabrication, contributes to the theory of the whole fabrication of the world, and that the mundane contrariety is connected by the middle fabrication proceeding from on high, from the first to the last of things, the Athenaic series adorning all things stably, and in a ruling and victorious manner, expanding indeed the natures which are detained in matter, but preserving those undefiled that are separated from matter, and also that the other fabrication imparts appropriately motion, division, and difference to the things fabricated and proceeds supernally to the end. All this has been sufficiently shown and recalled to the memory by us in what we have before said. Since, however, he by whom this narration is made is analogous to the God who connects this contrariety, he, in a certain respect, imitates him. Okay. Right. Timaeus was symbolic of the demiurge. Right. So he's imitating the demiurge in connecting the contrariety. All right. And through a recurrence to the fathers of the narration, through what was heard by Critias and Solon, he ascends to the Egyptians, conformably to what pre-exists in the paradigm, which is filled from first causes and fills things posterior to itself with demiurgic power. Farther still, since he brings with him an image of the second, which proceeds from another fabrication, hence he says that he recollected the history through the discourse of Socrates. For the recollection itself is not a transition from images to paradigms, but from universal conceptions to more partial actions. Okay. Okay, so since he brings with him an image of the second, which proceeds from another fabrication. So, yeah, the thought here is a little, again, obscure, but I think, the idea that he goes from universal conceptions, that is what Socrates is talking about as far as the ideal state goes, to partial actions, historical events, makes sense. And so it's not a recollection from images to paradigms, but from universal conceptions to more partial actions, indicating that he recollects from Socrates as as a superior, because going from universal conceptions to partial actions, like theory to history, is moving downward. But it is still recollection is caused in any case, but it's not the kind of recollection that is from image to paradigm. Hence also, it is adapted to the progression of the whole fabrication of things. For since all things are in intelligibles, every demiurgic cause distributes total productions according to its proper order. Again, if you consider what is said after another manner, you will find that the Athenians are praised in an admirable manner, and that the polity of Socrates is fitly celebrated. For that it is possible for this polity to exist is demonstrated through the life of the ancient Athenians, and also that it is productive of the greatest good to those who belong to it, which also Socrates thinks fit to demonstrate in his Republic. But he is likewise of opinion that those who live according to the best form of a polity should be shown to deserve the greatest admiration. For those who are fashioned according to the first paradigm are truly admirable, since of mundane natures also, the more divine, which transcendentally receive the whole form of their paradigms, are said to be and are monadic. But material natures, which have the same form in many subjects, possess the last order. Okay. This, therefore, which in the fabrication of things belongs to the gods, viz., to partake transcendently of their proper paradigm, the city of the Athenians also exhibits, by applying itself in the most excellent manner to the best measure of life. Moreover, the circle of benefits imitates the mundane circle, for the Egyptians are benefited by the Athenians through warlike works, and the Athenians are benefited by the Egyptians through sacerdotal narrations. For the communication of an unwritten action was a return of favor. But in addition to this, the doctrinal narration of the deeds of their ancestors exhibits a multiplied retribution. So we were looking before at like why were the Sacians having a better memory of these things and yet were inferior to the ancient Athenians in some sense. So here's just another point that that the fact that it's a narration of events like that exhibits a multiplied retribution, and maybe you could say that, you know, Socrates, exemplifying the Athenians in the Republic, thinks of this ideal state in pure concepts, universal concepts. So there, like the historical story is kind of inferior to the way that Socrates, for instance, has access to this ideal state. But okay, the mention also fortune and divinity and the excitation of our reasoning powers are worthy of the theory of Plato. For fortune and her gifts are not without a scope or indefinite, but she is a power collective of many dispersed causes, adorning things that are without arrangement and giving completion to what is allotted to each individual from the universe. Why then did Socrates collect many things which agree with the narration of Solon? I answer, on account of the cause which collects many dispersed causes, and on account of the one divinity who connects the common intellect of Socrates and Solon. For being of an Athenaic characteristic, they are excited, as it were, from one fountain, their tutelary goddess, to similar conceptions. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that for today. This is actually a lot more easygoing than some other sections. Just a lot to remember, absorb as much as you can as we go through this, and I'm sure this is the kind of thing where you just get, you know, kind of the effect of these analogical interpretations over and over, associations with different gods, and that will just kind of help interpret other things in the future. It's not like reading kind of philosophical theory where it's like this point builds on this point. It's just like a wash of a bunch of different kind of analogical articulations of one kind of meta theory, meta system that Proclus has in mind. And I don't know if there's a better way of getting at Proclus's thinking, and maybe Plato's, than by kind of going through this, even if it doesn't always seem 100% connected. Not that it's like totally disorderly, but I just wanted to say, yeah, you just have to like let it all wash over you and try to remember as much as you can. That's my strategy here. So we'll pick up here next time. Thanks everybody, and all the usual groups tomorrow. So talk to you then.